Hey, welcome back. As you can see, there's a lot going on after dark on the mountain. And in fact, roughly half your life happens after dark. Now, that may not be the case if you're still in the city or the suburbs where there's so much light pollution it never really gets dark. Um, but if you're off grid in the middle of nowhere, you know how important it is. So, why do so many off grid channels never mention what goes on for half of your life? I couldn't tell you. But while I'm driving up the mountain, I'm going to demonstrate the light bar on my Jeep and discuss why off-road lighting solutions are probably the perfect way for you to light up your off-grid cabin. Now, the biggest difference is going to be the size and shape of the area you want to light up. In a suburban environment, you don't want to throw light too far. You don't want your floodlights shining in your neighbor's bedroom window, keeping them up all night. And, it's the city's responsibility to pay for the street. You don't want to light that up. You really just want the light around your house. In the rural areas, it's completely different. You've got long distances to contend with. Your driveway may be half a mile long. And if there's a commotion in the middle of the night in your chicken coop, which may be, 200 feet from your house, you may want to light that up really fast. So that's why floodlights do a great job in suburbia, but they do not meet the needs of off-grid cabins. And that's where light bars come in. Because they're designed for vehicle use, they throw light a long way in a relatively narrow beam. So they're not magic. They seem like they put out a lot more light, but really they use reflectors to just focus that light in a particular direction, where floodlights use diffusers to kind of spread it out and make it softer. So you could see a light bar might have a 10 degree to 40 degree beam width compared to 120 degrees on a floodlight. They also focus on candela versus lumens. Those are terms that you use to measure the amount of light output, and you'll want to familiarize yourself with those before you buy, just so you understand what you're getting, right? You don't want to just compare one of those, you want to compare both. Another big difference is they're DC versus AC for the most part, because your vehicle is a 12 volt DC system, and there's a good chance your cabin is 12 volt DC as well. If you put your lights 12 volt DC off a 12 volt DC battery, then you don't have to worry about an inverter. One more difference is that the light bars are higher cost initially, but I've never known a single light bar to go out. Where on my suburban home, I'm changing floodlight bulbs, every few months. And that's because the light bars are designed differently, right? They pot the chips, so they don't break when you're off-roading and rock climbing and stuff like that. And they also have huge heat sinks, so the heat from the bulb doesn't burn out the electronics. Okay, I wanted to show you the three light bars that I'm using right now. The first is a 50-inch dual row that's on the Jeep. And I'm not going to read these slides to you, so feel free to pause if you'd like. The next one is a 30-inch dual row on the side-by-side. And then I especially wanted to show you a little 10-inch that I actually put on the cabin. It's just a single row, and it's very inexpensive, but works fantastic. And throwing light down my driveway. And just for fun, I'm going to throw into the comparison my everyday carry flashlight. It's a mod light with the PLH head. It's essentially the same as I have on my go-to carbine, except that one has the OKW head. Okay, so my focus again is how far can you throw light? Because I think that's what's important for many off-grid uses that's not met by traditional residential lighting. So in order to give you a comparison of these, I've taken a video, but the video doesn't show very effectively, and certainly not objectively, what the light looks like hundreds of feet down the road, right? Um, so in order to give you an objective comparison, I have done the calculations here to show you how far each of these products really throws light. And to do that, I have arbitrarily selected a unit of 400 lux. 400 lux is essentially the amount of light on a well-lit office desk. So if you think, for example, of something that you would sit at and you'd read a book or a newspaper, and you would be comfortable with the amount of light, you wouldn't feel like it was too dim. Just a well lit office, I think, is something that most people can relate to. Where it would be very difficult to say, what 1 lux is. As a matter of fact, 1 lux is 1 lumen spread across 1 square meter, and you can see how that's kind of a difficult figure to relate to. Okay, so now let's look at the numbers finally. If I want to start with my residential floodlight, I can put that thing 5 feet from my desk and still read as if I was in my well-lit office. But by way of comparison, car headlights, which are much more focused, I could put those 30 feet away and still have the same amount of light on my desk. And that little 10-inch single row light bar that I showed you that I have attached to my cabin, I could put my desk 60 feet away and still have the same amount of light as I do in a well-lit office. Now, obviously, that's very focused, and it's not providing that light, in 180 degrees or something. It's providing it in under 40 degrees, but that's throwing light a long way. And with a 50-inch dual row light bar that had, if you stop to read, 1.1 million candela, I can put that thing almost 200 feet away from my desk and still have a well-lit desk that I could comfortably read by. And that's really throwing a lot of light. As you probably noticed in the beginning of this video, the mountain's kind of curvy. And even though I've got over a mile of driveway, I really don't have a spot that is long and straight enough to demonstrate just how far this light bar throws light. So I had to drive down into the valley and find a road with no traffic on it. So like I said earlier, this comparison isn't super objective. You've got the numbers if you want the objective analysis. But hopefully this gives you a perspective, at least, on the value of throwing light and what products do it well, right? And how to compare the numbers to what you see in the picture. Okay, the last thing we're going to talk about in this video is how to use these lights for security. Now, in order to understand that, you need to understand a term called a photonic barrier. And rather than give you a dictionary definition of that, the best way that I can describe it is if you're in a car at night and there's a car in the oncoming lane and you've got your headlights on, you can see everything in their car. You can see their driver, his face, you can see the details, the color of the car, etc. But when they turn their headlights on, suddenly you can't see any of that, right? It's just all lost in this glare. And that's not because you stopped sending light into their car. You still are. And you're probably blinding the driver in the oncoming lane, just like he's blinding you now. But you still can't see through this photonic barrier because the way the rods and cones in your eye work and how they're getting overloaded by the light from their headlights, which is much more powerful than the light that you're sending into their car that's reflecting off, say, the driver's face. Now, the other thing that I want you to think about is if you're standing in your yard and the floodlight is turned on, you can see everything in your yard, but there's typically a very clear boundary where the light drops off quickly and it's darkness beyond that, meaning you can see up to the edge of the darkness, but no further. However, if you think about standing in the darkness, looking back at your house and your yard where the floodlight is, you could be standing 100 feet away and still see the house very clearly. You can be in the darkness and still see what's in the light. You could be a mile away with binoculars and still see very clearly in the circle of light what's going on. But if you're in the circle of light looking out, you can only see as far as the circle of light. So now let's put these two concepts together and create a strategy for lighting your off-grid cabin. So first of all, you want to light up the areas that you want to see, what's going on. Let's say, your chicken coop, around your cabin, maybe your barn, whatever it is that you need to light up. But you also want to think about who can see you and whether or not you can see them. And so you might want to project light, an overwhelming amount of light, down your driveway or any obvious avenue of approach, right? So essentially what you're doing is creating a photonic barrier where people can tell, there's a light, obviously, okay, but they can't see you or your stuff because you've created this photonic barrier, right? And hopefully you can still see them. Now, one thing to consider is if they're coming up your driveway, they may be in a vehicle with headlights or even a light bar. It's pretty common in the rural areas. So you might even get a little bit more sophisticated and angle your driveway so that it approaches your house not in a straight line. So if a car is going to be on your driveway, their headlights are not pointing at your house. Their light bar is not pointing directly at you. They're coming in on a curve that keeps their light, off in another direction, while your light is focused on, the avenue of approach. So to implement your strategy, the first thing that you have to think about is your wiring. How far apart do your lights need to be, to get onto each end of your cabin? If those are fairly close, right, then you could stick with DC lighting, and you could use strip lights like I do instead of residential floodlights for just illuminating the yard, right? But if you need to run the wiring an appreciable distance, hundreds of feet or something like that, and your lights are going to be a long way apart, it may make sense to run an inverter and use AC lighting. And then you could just, for the floodlights, use standard residential flood bulbs, right? But you want to also consider using the light bars in either event to project and create photonic barriers, right? So what you'll really wind up using is a mix. And if you are going to use the DC lighting, keep in mind that there's lots of other products, that are meant to provide flood style lighting on vehicles, campers, RVs, stuff like that, Jeeps. little square lights, stuff like that aren't the huge light bars. And they still work on 12 volt DC to be compatible with the car systems, and they're relatively low wattage and put out a decent amount of light. So that there's still a good option for that if your wiring distances are conducive. Well, that's about all I have to say. Y'all come back now.